When I first looked at the detachments in the Adepta Sororitas Codex, I saw a remade Hallowed Martyrs from the Index, which didn't really interest me. I played some Bringers of Flame to see what all the fuss was about and got it to work as an army without the vehicles it was so obviously intended to have. Army of Faith with its extra miracle dice and endurance took my interest, and I generally avoided the Penitent Host. I played it a bit here and there, but never really went deep into it. That was a mistake. The Penitent Host is a stupidly fun detachment. So we're going to go over the detachment rule, which annoyingly has two versions running at the same time, so we'll unpick that. We'll look at the penitent units that get the benefits of the detachment, the stratagems and enhancements and the tactics around using them, how to play the Penitent Host, the weaknesses of the Penitent Host, and then we'll finish off with some army lists and a quick recap of the perfect way to play this detachment. So, this is the detachment rule as it first came out in the Codex. At the start of the battle round, you pick one of 3 vows. Unfortunately, it says, at the start of the battle round, select one of the following vows, not, you can select one of the following vows. And each vow can only be selected once per battle. So there were questions of, did you mean to say you can pick one, much in the same way as the Gladius Task Force works, and the Black Spear Task Force of the Death Watch? Or are you enforced to pick one in the first battle round, and then another in the next battle round, and another in the next battle round because you have to select one, meaning that you can't pick one in battle round 4 and 5? The FAQ that was released in October 2024 said, as rules as written, you must select one at the start of the first battle round, meaning there's nothing in battle round 4 and 5. Which definitely turned me away from the Penitent Host, because I don't have any flexibility to pick when I use these abilities that only affect certain units in my army. December 2024 said, no, in the balance patch, you pick when you want to use the rules. You can select one of the following vows to be active for your army, but still only use each of them once per battle. Both of these rules are currently true. The FAQ is in the faction pack if you're wanting to play with what is written in the Codex, but then you still need to download this extra rule, or you can download the balance patch, which is more widely used by people. This balance patch version of the rules is the one that appears in the app, and it has the better version of the detachment rule and is more intuitive. You can pick one, but you don't have to pick one, but each of them can only be used once, and it lasts until the next battle round. So once you've picked whether you're doing the rules as written version, which follows the FAQ, or the balance patch version, which is the one most people follow, including myself, what are these 3 vows? The first one is the Path of the Penitent, which adds 3 inches to the movement characteristic of penitent models from your army. It's penitent models, not any unit with the penitent keyword. I'll explain this more a bit later on, but you need to be careful what is mentioning models and what is mentioning penitent units. This is increasing the speed of your movement value. It's not an advance roll, it's not making you advance. You can still use this and then charge. So your Arco-flagellants and your Repentia are moving 10 inches, then they can advance, and if they don't advance, they can charge. This is very useful when you want to have a lot of charging happening across your army. It gives you the speed to succeed on those charges. Think of it as essentially +3 to a charge roll, and then you realize, oh yeah, okay, this is really, really powerful. Perhaps the most powerful one. Death Before Disgrace is the defensive version. Whenever a penitent model from your army is destroyed by a melee attack, if it hasn't fought that phase, roll a dice on a 2+, that model can fight before being removed. This doesn't do too much if the enemy is a shooting-focused army, like the Tau, like a lot of Imperial Guard, but if the enemy is a more melee-focused army, like Khorne Berserkers are featuring heavily, you know you're going to get charged a lot, you know they're going to kill you, most of your models will still get to fight before dying for one whole battle round. So that means that if you're going first, you'll have to remember to activate this in preparation for the enemy's turn, even if you don't get much out of it on your turn. Absolution in battle is the one I think is the weakest despite it looking incredibly strong. If your unit charged, then penitent models get to add 1 to their attacks characteristic and their strength characteristic in melee. The extra attacks are especially nice for Repentia, who otherwise only have 2 attacks. Arco-flagellants are already able to get 6 attacks each, and the increased strength may not be enough to tip you into another threshold, as the Arco-flagellants are already strength 5, the Repentia are already strength 6. The Penitent Buzzblades are strength 10 and have twin linked on the Mortifiers and the Penitent Engines. That is usually enough to be wounding pretty well anyway. So this is the least important vow compared to movement to get you into combat and the ability to fight even though you're dead. So what units are we going to use this ability on? Of course it's going to be Penitent units. In theory, not every Penitent unit is as useful as another Penitent unit, and Penitent units aren't the only one you want in this detachment. Repentia are the first one, battle sisters who have failed in their duty and must seek atonement for these past failings. This is a unit that has grenades. Don't forget the grenades if you need to do some shooting. Yeah, there's one bolt pistol, but also grenades, which can be useful to do damage before you get into combat. You can do a lot of damage in combat. The Repentia models, apart from the superior, have the Penitent Eviscerator, which has sustained hits, but only 2 attacks, strength 6, AP -2, 2 damage, and a weapon skill of 4+, but we're not too bothered about that, because we can reroll all hit rolls and reroll all wound rolls as long as the Repentia Superior is alive. Those rerolls are for Repentia models only, not the Superior, not any characters that could potentially join the unit. Remember to look for any rules. Does it say this unit or does it say these particular models? The Repentia are good for taking out heavy infantry like Chaos Space Marines with their damage 2 attacks. They're also very good against light infantry with their AP -2 attacks. Orcs are wounded on a 3+, termagants and cultists are wounded on a 2+, with rerolls, and the sustained hits, you get about as many kills as attacks. AP -2 goes straight through a 5+ save. But while thinking of saves, Repentia have basically no staying power. You can take some saves on the Superior, but if she fails a save, and her feel no pain, because that works on every model in the squad, and then dies, there's no more rerolls for that unit. So it's worth keeping the Superior alive. Against 2 attacks incoming that have successfully wounded, I will risk losing 2 Repentia. Against 20 attacks, where it could wipe out the whole squad, I'll start putting them on the Superior first just to see how many she can tank, with a Miracle Dice of a 3 if I have one, if that's going to save an attack. Then the 6+ invulnerable save of the Repentia. But because the Repentia are very fragile, keep them hidden unless they're attacking and make sure the thing they attack they can kill. Usually you can, but you need to keep them safe. So we have Rhinos. Rhinos will get the Repentia to safety. You don't want to get shot turn 1 or turn 2, as, you know, your models are toughness 3, with their best save being their 6+ invulnerable save. Indirect fire especially hurts a lot. But Repentia are the ultimate glass cannon. Put them in Rhinos. If you don't have a Rhino, Rapid Ingress is cheaper. Well, you don't pay with points value, it costs command points. And then you arrive, and hopefully are doing so out of line of sight, so you're not just turning up and getting shot, and then in your coming turn, you can move and charge. You can arrive from the board edge without using Rapid Ingress, then you're arriving in your own turn, but then you have to be 9 inches away from the enemy, then you're paying with probably a Miracle Dice of a 6, so you have a good chance of succeeding at that charge roll. And when you charge enemies not in line of sight to at least avoid Overwatch. You are allowed to charge out of line of sight in 40k unless you're playing in boarding actions. Arco-flagellants don't really get redemption. They are criminals, people with heretical views, people with too many questions about the contradictions of the Imperial faith. They are turned into cyborg murder machines and used as disposable shock troops. Arco-flagellants are super specialized into killing hordes because of their weight of attacks. 6 per model when you use that trigger word. Keep using that trigger word unless you are finishing off the very last few easily killed infantry. You gain hazardous, so you roll a dice for every model that did attack, and for every roll of a 1, that model takes 3 mortal wounds. But you can potentially survive with your feel no pain. And it's certainly worth doing the trigger word when you're fighting on death, because you can't die twice. The Arco-flagellants are a little bit tougher than the Repentia. They have the same feel no pain, they have the same toughness, same invulnerable save, but they have 2 wounds per model. That alone can keep them around, because a lot of enemy sweep attacks from demon princes, a lot of characters, those are damage 1. And with the feel no pain, you could survive them. So the enemy may be doing strike attacks to kill a few Arco-flagellants rather than the horde sweeper that normally works against massed infantry. But if the enemy has lots of weak shots, like firing a lot of lasguns, autoguns, bolters, the Arco-flagellants will die quickly. You can have units of 3 in this edition, as the 3 Arco-flagellants from the previous combat patrol are still included as an option, so it's a squad of 3 or a squad of 10. You can do in between, but then you're paying the points for a squad of 10. A squad of 3 is useful for holding objectives cheaply, and they can complete secondary missions, but they can perform that role in any detachment. For the most part, I think Arco-flagellants are okay without a Ministorum Priest. The Ministorum Priest gives them +1 to wound, and that is useful, but we want the Priest for other things in the unit. Mainly as the only character that can join Arco-flagellants, and so the only one that can bring enhancements. While the Ministorum Priest could lead Novitiates, Dominions, or Battle Sisters, those are not combat units, you only get the +1 to wound in combat. They don't really have combat weapons, so Arco-flagellants are the only ones you really look at. They can lead Sanctifiers. If they lead Sanctifiers, the Sanctifiers also get sustained hits 1, but the Sanctifiers are not massively kitted out for combat. The Ministorum Priests can act alone as another useful unit completing missions and secondary missions, but we have 3 Arco-flagellants for that. In a unit of Arco-flagellants, the Ministorum Priests are not just adding 1 to the wound rolls of Arco-flagellants and their own attacks, they're also bringing some decent combat power with the Zealots Vindictor. That's 3 strength 5 attacks, but AP -1 and damage 2. Once per battle, that particular model, that Ministorum Priest model, just the model, can go to strength 8 and 6 attacks. And the Zealous Vindictor also comes with a Flamer. The alternative to the Vindictor is a Holy Pistol and Power Weapon, which has a slightly better hit chance, a slightly worse strength, a slightly better AP, a slightly worse damage. Damage is quite important. Unless you're fighting enemies with 1 wound, you're always going to want the higher damage Zealots Vindictor. We'll talk about enhancements in a minute. There are 2 more Penitent units, the Penitent Engine and the Mortifiers. Penitent Engines are very fast moving with Advance and Charge and the Assault keyword on their flamers, so you can shoot them before you go into combat. You could have a unit of 2 in this detachment. They are fielded as 1s or 2s. Then you have a decent Overwatch threat of essentially 4 twin-linked flamers, because each Penitent Engine has 2d6 shots that are twin-linked. Or you field them as units of 1, then they die as units of 1, and you get a miracle dice for every Penitent Engine that's destroyed. Or they can be used to complete primary and secondary missions without as much points investment. They're fixed to have flamers, and then you get 3 choices of weapons, either twin Penitent Flails, twin Penitent Buzzblades, or 1 Penitent Flail and 1 Penitent Buzzblade. If you pick one of each, you only ever attack with 1, but what you have there is versatility of choice. Do you want 8 damage 1 attacks, or do you want 4 damage 2 attacks? I would say stick with the twin Penitent Buzzblades, leave the Flails for Arco-flagellants. We have enough speed to get the dedicated units into the correct place. So Repentia against heavy infantry, Arco-flagellants against light infantry, the twin Buzzblades and the Penitent Engines are strength 10 with twin linked if there's 2 of them, so you can wound tanks, some heavy infantry like Traitor Marines, but don't rush into 10 Berserkers or Chaos Legionaries. You have sustained hits, but you can only kill as many models as you have attacks. Half the squad remaining can bring you down in your own turn. Mortifiers want the same melee weapons, but they have a choice of range weapons. You can have 2 Mortifier Flamers, which are basically the same as the Penitent Engines Flamers, but they don't have Assault. You can have 2 Heavy Bolters. That's going to be best for 6 shots at damage 2. Or you can have 1 of each, and I don't see the benefit to 1 of each. Then you're not specializing in a way that's useful for auto-hitting, with potentially Overwatch, and you're not getting as many longer range damage 2 attacks. You have the option to add an Anchorite Sarcophagus to 1 model in the unit, so only have units of 1, then every Mortifier can have an Anchorite Sarcophagus. This gives you a 3+ save at the cost of 1 point of movement. Movement 7 and a 3+ save. The Mortifiers have a better hit chance compared to the Penitent Engine. Mortifiers hit on a 3+, including with their heavy bolters. Penitent Engines hit on a 4+. They're a better kind of engine, but not as fast, with movement 7 if you have the sarcophagus, and no advance and charge without stratagem support. Both are good in the Penitent Host, but if you're picking one compared to the other, I would take a Mortifier. And then a non-penitent unit, but a very useful support unit, is the Triumph of St. Catherine. At the start of the battle round, instead of rolling to see what miracle dice you get, you automatically get a 6. 6s are wonderful for guaranteeing charges. That is the most important roll in any game of 40k, especially with the Penitent Host. A successful charge compared to a failed charge is the difference between some of your attacks being able to hit or all of your attacks guaranteed to fail. And you gain extra movement when you charge. That can get you onto an objective. The Triumph of St. Catherine has 2 really good relics for this detachment. The Fiery Heart, which gives all Adepta Sororitas units within 6 inches 2 more inches to their move, and you add 1 to advance and charge rolls. So a Penitent Engine is going to move 10 inches, advance d6 plus 1, and potentially charge 2d6 plus 1 if it can stay within that 6 inches when it makes the charge move. Common point of confusion, as we didn't really have it last edition, Adepta Sororitas, that is any unit in the Adepta Sororitas Codex or the faction pack. Penitent Engines are Adepta Sororitas, even if they were not a core part of the army in 9th edition, and didn't have the core keyword, which a lot of things were triggering from in that edition. The other really useful ability is the Petals of the Bloody Rose. While a unit is within 6 inches of the Triumph of St. Catherine, improve the armor penetration of their melee weapons by 1. Arco-flagellants now have AP -1. Mortifier and Penitent Engine Buzzblades are AP -4. That is usually no save for a lot of the units they will be attacking. And these abilities also work on the Triumph because it is an Adepta Sororitas unit. So it can move really fast alongside the Penitent units. It can have an extra point of armor penetration on its 18 melee attacks. The Triumph is a dangerous unit in its own right, as well as great support for Penitent units. When making a Penitent Host army, there are other units to consider, but these are generally useful units, like Battle Sisters, which have sticky objectives, and a Simulacrum to generate miracle dice, Seraphim to drop in and attack the enemy, or complete secondary missions, and Paragon Warsuits to help you take out vehicles. And with one of the enhancements, you can make other characters penitent as well. The Catechism of Divine Penitence does 2 things. First, it gives the penitent keyword to the model, and second, it allows the unit to join Repentia. This is the only way in any detachment that you can have a character, any character, join a Repentia. And it is still limited to the Ministorum Priest, Canonesses, and the Palatine. Gaining the Penitent keyword is not going to be useful for the Ministorum Priest. They already have the Penitent keyword. So if you put it on a Ministorum Priest, it's to have the Ministorum Priest join the Repentia, and then you're getting +1 to wound, but you have strength 6 anyway and full rerolls to wound, so that's not really necessary. But attaching a Palatine to the Repentia gives you a quick and dirty combo. The Palatine will give her unit lethal hits. The Repentia already have sustained hits 1 on their Penitent Eviscerators. One of the stratagems, the Passion of the Penitent, lets you have critical hits on a 5+ instead of a 6+. So that's sustained hits and lethal hits triggering on a 5+, and as long as you have your superior alive in the squad, you get full rerolls to hit. So anything that's not a 5 or a 6, you can reroll in the hope of getting a 5 or a 6. This is very horrifying. It can take down most big enemies, or at least horribly maim them. We're talking Chaos Knights, Greater Demons, units like that. And now that the Palatine has the Penitent keyword, she will get the benefit of a lot more of the detachment rules and abilities, like Absolution in Battle. If the unit charged, you get +1 attack and +1 strength. That will apply to the Palatine, and the extra attack and the extra strength will help her Rapturous Blows. The more attack she has, the more successful wounds she can have, the higher her strength, the more likely she is to wound, and the more the Rapturous Blows ability will cause mortal wounds on the enemy. The Palatine and Repentia is a very expensive combo. It will die pretty quickly to anything, so you need to either use Rapid Ingress or a Rhino to get them into the fight. You can use the Catechism of Divine Penitence on a Canoness with the Blessed Blade. If she joins Repentia, her lethal hits are on a 5+, the same as the Repentia with the Passion of the Penitent stratagem, so you'll probably want to go for a Blessed Blade. You don't need the Power Sword and the Rod of Office, which lets you reroll hit rolls of 1, because as long as the Repentia Superior is alive, the Repentia models get to reroll hit rolls anyway. But the Canoness will give you free stratagems, like the Passion of the Penitent. The Catechism of Divine Penitence also works on a jump pack Canoness. She has the Canoness keyword. With Repentia, your stratagems are cheaper, and she can give them a shorter charge because she can fly ahead of the rest of the unit, staying in coherency with 2 Repentia models, but that is like +3 on their charge move. Or we can forget about joining Repentia. Have a jump Canoness join Zephyrim. As a model, with the Penitent keyword, she can go a little bit faster. If you have the Path of the Penitent vow active, she could fight on death with Death Before Disgrace as a vow. She can do that. The Zephyrim can't because it triggers off Penitent models. But the unit shares keywords, so this is now a Penitent unit even if there is only one Penitent model. Check if an ability works off Penitent models or Penitent units. The Lash of Guilt stratagem lets your unit advance and still be eligible to charge. That is a Penitent unit. Before you get too excited and look at Purity of Suffering, which is a stratagem you use on a Penitent unit, the effect is that Penitent models get a 4+ Feel No Pain. Not every model in the Penitent unit. The difference between a model and a unit. Like if you're using Passion of the Penitent and the Zephyrim picked lethal hits as their bonus, the Canoness's Eviscerator, which of course we take for the theme, would get sustained and lethal hits on a 5+, but the Zephyrim would only have critical hits on a 6. They are not Penitent models. The Psalm of Righteous Judgment is perhaps the best enhancement. This can go on any of your characters, it doesn't need to be a Penitent model like the Minister and Priest, and you're not limited to Canoness or Palatine, so this could go on a Hospitaller that's with Battle Sisters staying at the back of the board. As long as the bearer of the enhancement is on the battlefield, each time an enemy unit is destroyed by a Penitent unit, you can swap out one of your Miracle Dice for a Miracle Dice that's a 6. You just rotate the dice so that it's a 6. Unfortunately, you usually get the Miracle Dice in the combat phase for use in the charge phase next turn, but it will work on shooting. You just need to have a Penitent unit destroy an enemy unit. So if a Mortifier finishes an enemy unit with its heavy bolters, you swap a Miracle Dice for a 6 to use in the coming charge phase. This enhancement is the reason I don't feel the loss of the Triumph in many of my Penitent Host lists. It used to be a unit I take all the time, now it's an option. The Verse of Holy Piety is only once per game, but it lets a unit use a vow even if that vow has already been picked previously in the battle. And it stacks with other Vows of Atonement. This is where you can have Path of the Penitent for +3 inches of movement and also Absolution in battle to get 1 more attack and 1 more strength. Or if it was your fight on death turn, but you wanted to move this unit extra far to get in combat, Path of the Penitent to move more inches and be able to charge the enemy much easier, and then in the enemy's coming turn, Death Before Disgrace is still active so that your unit can fight on death. It's basically going to be used on an Arco-flagellant unit that has a Minister and Priest, because the enhancement has to be put on a Penitent model. The only character that's Penitent is the Minister and Priest. You can make other characters Penitent, but that is a separate enhancement, and you can't have 2 enhancements on a model. Do you want an extra special Arco-flagellant unit? Perhaps. And there is an FAQ to say that if the character is killed, the unit continues to benefit for the whole battle round. The alternative enhancement to have on a Minister and Priest leading a unit of Arco-flagellants is the Refrain of Enduring Faith. This gives you a 5+ invulnerable save instead of a 6+ invulnerable save. It's quite expensive at 25 points, but Arco-flagellants with a 5+ invulnerable save and a stratagem to make their Feel No Pain a 4+ and their 2 wounds can give you a very durable unit that could potentially survive an enemy turn and still be there in your turn. I'm mentioning a lot of stratagems, let's look through the stratagems. Devout Fanaticism. This is used in the enemy shooting phase after an enemy unit has finished shooting. That has been updated from how it's written in the Codex. It lets one of your Penitent units surge d6 inches. You can end in engagement range. The idea being one enemy unit will shoot you, you will then not quite charge them but move into engagement range of them, and then other enemy units will not be able to shoot you. Or perhaps an enemy unit shot you, you move into engagement, and then they're relying on firing pistols if they have pistols. You don't need to lose any models to make this surge move, unlike Khorne Berserker's surge move or Genestealer Cult Metamorph surge move. And because in the fight phase, neither you nor the enemy unit that you surged into have charged, you will usually be able to fight before them. Because after completing the fighting attacks of any units that charged, or enemy units that have fight first, which can include charging, then you alternate starting with the player whose turn is not taking place. Your turn is not taking place, so you can fight with your Arco-flagellants before the enemy unit that you moved into. Another useful stratagem as a counter to shooting armies is Final Redemption. If the enemy doesn't want to charge you on an objective, potentially because you have Death Before Disgrace and can therefore fight on death, or you're a Mortifier who has the fight on death on a 2+ ability, Final Redemption lets one of your units that's destroyed on an objective remain in control of that objective. It is stickied, but stickied with blood. You control it until your opponent controls it at the start or end of any phase. I know the stratagem says start or end of any turn, but the rules commentary, FAQ, updatey thing, errata, the many add-on rules say, no, this happens at the end of any phase. If the enemy didn't move onto an objective, you can lose the objective, except you don't lose the objective, so you can still score the objective in a coming turn. Purity of Suffering lets your Penitent units survive a bit longer. Arco-flagellants will benefit the most, as they can be the toughest to get through, but it can also keep a few more Repentia alive, or keep a Penitent engine alive that was otherwise going to be destroyed before it could fight. Lash of Guilt can be used on Penitent engines who already have Advance and Charge, then they will move 14 inches instead of their d6 plus their 8-inch move, but I think it's better on any other Penitent unit in a turn when you're not using the Path of the Penitent, so that they're more likely to get into combat. If you're not in combat with the Penitent Host units, they're not doing much. I hope they're doing an action instead, otherwise they're just sitting around feeling sorry for themselves. Passion of the Penitent is a stratagem that lets you have critical hits on a 5+ rather than a 6+. Your Penitent units, the Arco-flagellants, the Mortifiers, the Penitent Engines, the Repentia, all have sustained hits 1 on their melee weapons. So it can always be worth using this, even if it's not in a Palatine Repentia mega combo. This way you can kill more enemies than you strictly have attacks. I find it especially useful on Repentia because they get to reroll their hit rolls on their Eviscerators, so you can get more 5s and 6s, which is more attacks. And you only hit on a 4+ anyway, so rerolling the 1, 2, and 3 is worth it, even if I would maybe keep the 4 because at least that's a successful hit. The last stratagem is Boundless Zeal, the only one that can be used on a unit that's not Penitent. It lets one of your units fall back and shoot, or fall back and charge. If it was a Penitent unit, it can fall back and shoot and charge. I can only think that the Mortifiers are going to be the unit you want to have fall back and shoot and charge. But it's good for Battle Sisters, they can fall back and shoot. It's good for Seraphim, while they have pistols so they could continue to shoot their pistols in melee. If you don't want to die, you can fall back, still be able to shoot, then use Angelic Ascent to move even more. That can get you onto an objective. Or if you had Sacrosancts in this army, and if you had a melee unit like that, I would hope you would swap it out for a Penitent unit instead. But that's a unit that could fall back and then charge. When you charge, you have fight first. It sort of lets you get a double strike on the enemy. They charged you, they attacked you, you attack back, then you fall back and charge back in, you attack again. So now we know the enhancements, the stratagems, the units you're taking in this detachment. What about the tactics? How do you play the Penitent Host? Well, you need to know that your army is so very fragile. Unlike Orcs or World Eaters, you can't rush forward and be somewhat okay. As soon as you can be seen, you die because your Penitent infantry have terrible saves. You have to make the enemy come to you. The Penitent Host is a counter-charge detachment. Get behind cover. Take objectives with disposable Penitent units like 3 Arco-flagellants or Mortifiers. You have Final Redemption to control an objective even if you were shot to death, or if you're charged, the Mortifiers can still fight on death. The enemy has to come to you, because either they are moving onto the objectives to score secondary missions and primary missions in their next turn, and you are going to have to counterattack and kill them, or You have moved on to the objectives with those disposable units, the Arco-flagellants, the Mortifiers, potentially other units, and you're using death before absolution, so you fight on death. The enemy will have to commit so that they can take the objectives and have enough models left to hold those objectives, which we're going to stop them from doing when we counterattack with the main part of our army. Then we have the problem of trading, which is a chess term that's crept into competitive 40k. Yes, you lose a cheap unit, the enemy is then poised to lose a more expensive unit than that. But if your Repentia come out and kill 10 orcs, and you get killed in turn very easily, your opponent has done far better from those exchanges and ends with the objective. So you would need regular battle sisters to get on objectives, and they last longer than Repentia, and can sticky and control the objective with their Defenders of the Faith ability. They generate miracle dice, and are less valuable as a loss than the 10 Repentia. But maybe the enemy got to the objectives first, as they're also a fast-moving army. Then you need a speed boost to counter them. That's where you use the Path of the Penitent and the Triumph. The Triumph also gives you a miracle dice for 6 to use on charge rolls. High miracle dice are used on charge rolls in this detachment. The Triumph is a nice unit to have despite its high points, but you can manage without it as long as you have the Psalm of Righteous Judgment. Then you have miracle dice for 6 to make your charges. Having a go turn, much in the same way as Genestealer Cult have a and now we pop up and shoot you, this is our and now we rush really fast and charge you. I can see why it felt really strong on Codex release, and Games Workshop targeted it right away before moving on to the Bringers of Flame nerf hammer raised. You have to have your specialized units target the right thing. Arco-flagellants have to charge light infantry, or at worst, the heavy infantry like Space Marines if there's nothing lighter in the enemy army. They do nothing to tanks. Even wounding on a 5, with no AP, you won't do much to a tank. Repentia can do a little better, but specialize in killing heavy infantry, Chaos Space Marines with 2 wounds, and their rerolls to wound mean they can potentially hurt bigger targets, but it really reinforces their job of killing heavy infantry. They cost about the same as a Space Marine, so you need to get each girl to kill a Space Marine. The Penitent Engines and Mortifiers kill tanks, or at least hurt them badly. This is assuming you have the Buzzblades and not the Flails, because we have enough Flails on the Arco-flagellants. Strength 10, twin linked for rerolls on the wound roll and AP -3. You can do serious damage to tanks and monsters. You'll need to learn how many Penitent Engines it takes to screw off the top of a Predator tank. Your Penitent units are specialized and close combat oriented. To put that more into 40k context, you are playing Combat Eldar, potentially very fast, highly specialized, but die easily to the lightest of attacks. So that's one of our problems, and there are many problems you have when playing the Penitent Host. It's not fair that you only get the vows once, and only on some units. It's like the Gladius Task Force, but the Gladius Task Force is army-wide. Space Marines just have it better. The Librarius Conclave has 5 options, and you can only use them on specific Psyker units, but you can repeat the same one over and over. The Penitent Host should be like that. You could boost the Penitent Host that way, or let Penitent things trigger on Penitent units, adding a Preacher to any unit to fully benefit from the detachment. Like then it's a Penitent unit, and you change the wording on things that are Penitent models. And then the Catechism of Divine Penitence lets, say, your Sacrosancts fight on death once per game, if a Canoness with that enhancement is joining the unit. Games Workshop could do any of these. The Penitent Host has a problem of which armies we are able to beat. Elite armies with lots of monsters and vehicles we can't kill effectively. We're relying on our Repentia units and Penitent Engines, and the usual Morvenval and Paragon warsuits. The Psalm of Righteous Judgment won't get activated very much in that case. It needs to be a Penitent unit that destroys an enemy unit. Against hordes we can cut through them, but they're also able to kill our units rather well. 2 wounds and a feel no pain on an Arco-flagellant sounds good, except you are toughness 3 and naked. Repentia are similarly unarmored, and are very expensive per model. More horde armies are not. If a Repentia kill a unit and die afterwards, that will greatly favour our opponent if their army is lots of orcs or lots of Imperial Guard. The Penitent units work best in the Penitent Host, But Arco-flagellants and Repentia and Mortifiers and also Penitent Engines can work well in the Hallowed Martyrs and the Champions of Faith. That is a detachment that will benefit your whole army, or potentially your whole army. It doesn't limit you to a few units in a few turns. The Champions of Faith only works on units you pick to be righteous, and it is best for Paragon Warsuits and Celestian Sacrosants, but an Arco-flagellant unit or Repentia unit with To the Heart of Heresy, when picked to be righteous, you get +1 strength, you get a point of armor penetration on those Arco-flagellants. That can be enough to push enemies onto their invulnerable saves, and their armor saves becomes more likely to fail. Being righteous also gives them higher leadership, and increases their movement to movement 8. That is some speed and attacking power available. With the Path of the Righteous, your Arco-flagellants can consolidate much further. They can tie up an enemy unit after killing an enemy unit. And there's still Indefatigable Dedication, which is a stratagem in that detachment that lets you fall back and charge, if righteous. And while we can't get critical hits on a 5+, with Suffer Not the Unfaithful, you can have lethal hits to go with the sustained hits of your penitent units. In the Hallowed Martyrs, as soon as your unit loses a model, you get +1 to hit on that unit. Or if it's a Penitent Engine or Mortifier by itself, as soon as you lose a wound, you get +1 to hit. Your Mortifiers are hitting on a 2+. Your Penitent Engines now hit on a 3+. With Righteous Vengeance as a stratagem, that is full rerolls to hit. It doesn't matter if you've taken any casualties, but full rerolls to hit with the sustained hits of the Arco-flagellants and 6 attacks per model is horrifying. Repentia don't need that, they already have rerolls to their hit rolls, but Spirit of the Martyr to fight on death, and a guaranteed fight on death, not on a 2+. It's costing 2 command points, but the timing is much easier. You know when you're about to be killed, rather than having to plan and predict it at the start of a battle round. Suffering and Sacrifice lets your smaller units be disposable, and the enemy has to attack them, leaving your better units alive. If you charged Paragon Warsuits into an enemy monster, but you might not kill it because it's a horrifying greater demon, and you also charged in a Mortifier, or 3 Arco-flagellants, you can force the enemy to attack that disposable unit, and if it somehow survived in the following turn, you could do it again to make the enemy attack your fight on death Mortifier. You don't need to be in the Penitent Host to do well with penitent units. You will have to determine if you wanted to play the Penitent Host because you like the penitent units and want to give them a boost, in which case other detachments that serve your whole army are viable, or if you truly like the Penitent Host detachment because it is stupidly fun to run screaming at the enemy at high speed on a wing and a prayer. So what does a Penitent Host list look like? There are 2 ways to do it. One is a lot of penitent units and barely anything else. The other is half a standard Sisters army, half your fragile combat penitent units. So a functioning army may only have half its units benefit from the detachment rule and the stratagems. But I think that is the better way. If you go all penitent units, you won't have the versatility to benefit from tanks like the Castigator and Immolator, and you miss out on sticky objective Sisters and deep striking Seraphim. So you'll still want some of those units. It is not as bad in 1000 point games where you can really focus on the theme of the detachment, whereas at 2000 points, a lot of army lists look similar with the same units cropping up over and over. So let's first look at a penitent unit focus list of 1000 points. There's a Ministorum Priest with a Vindictor and the Psalm of Righteous Judgment. They lead 9 Sanctifiers. There's a Ministorum Priest with a Vindictor and the Refrain of Enduring Faith. They lead 10 Arco-flagellants. We have a Sororitas Rhino, and I'm going to put 10 Repentia inside it. There are 2 separate Mortifiers, so Mortifier 1, Anchorite Sarcophagus, Mortifier 2, Anchorite Sarcophagus, both with twin Buzzblades and heavy bolters. There are 10 Battle Sisters, and let's give them a Melter Gun and a Multi-Melter, and a Hand Flamer on the Superior. There's a unit of 3 Arco-flagellants, and a unit of 5 Seraphim with Hand Flamers. You can see, or hear, that there are only 3 non-penitent units after I touch characters. This is aiming to max out the number of models that can benefit from the detachment rule and the stratagems. We are repenting unto atonement with this one. We hold the home objective with 3 Arco-flagellants. If we need to hold it for primary missions, and the enemy uses indirect fire weapons, the final redemption will keep us in control. If the primary mission doesn't require the home objective, and we want the objectives in no man's land, the 3 fellows follow behind other units once the enemies attacking on that flank are dead. Then we just need some unit to hold that objective. 3 Arco-flagellants are good for that. Or there's the Battle Sisters, 10 Battle Sisters, who are mainly there to observe the Penitent army or hold the kill switches. They use the Defenders of the Faith on the home objective and any other objective that has been cleared of enemies by the Penitents. Sticky objectives is very powerful in a 1000 point game, as you don't have enough units to hold all the objectives, complete secondary missions, and kill the enemy. The Sanctifiers, when led by a Ministorum Priest, become a Penitent unit. So if this unit kills an enemy unit in combat or shooting their many flamer attacks, then one of your miracle dice becomes a 6 because of the Psalm of Righteous Judgment. A Penitent unit destroyed an enemy unit. Overwatch can kill enemy units, especially ones that come for us in the first turn, like infiltrating units, or fast-moving but light armored units, like jetbikes. In combat, this unit has sustained hits, a common theme for the Penitent Host, and +1 to wound, so it can kill quite a few of the units you see in 1000 points. And if there is a Baneblade, the Sanctifiers were not the right unit to fight it anyway. You don't have to scout, even though you can scout, and they don't want to be the first ones to fight and die, because you don't get as many Miracle Dice in 1000 point games as there are not as many units to lose, and that's one way to get Miracle Dice. We don't have as many units with Simulacrums, another way to get Miracle Dice. And so the Miracle Dice I get, I want to have good ones. So this priest needs to stay alive. Swapping out the Sanctifiers for a squad of 10 Arco-flagellants is another option, but because you can only have 2 of each unit in the 2025-2026 mission deck when playing at 1000 points, which is incursion size, I would have to make the unit of 3 Arco-flagellants into a unit of 10 and lose the Sanctifiers. Overall, that would be dropping a unit from the list and losing the already limited ranged attacks we have. You could, but I choose not to. The Ministorum Priest with the Refrain of Enduring Faith is there to have a really tough Arco-flagellant unit. Not impossible to kill, but at least harder for enemy units at 1000 points to punch through a 2 wound, 5+ invulnerable save, and 5+ or 4+ feel no pain unit. And all the while they can be cutting through the light infantry units of the enemy. The Rhino is there to safely transport the Repentia. It drops them off as they disembark and then move 10 more inches in the turn we use the Path of the Penitent. That is a massive threat range so that they can get to the enemy unit that they want to kill, the biggest, scariest unit the enemy has, and we are going to destroy it in an all-or-nothing strike. Avoid torrent weapons that might overwatch because even a few can mess up your unit. These Repentia should be used for nothing else other than killing the biggest threat the enemy has. I considered 2 units of 5, they could still go in the same Rhino, but then there is 1 less Penitent Eviscerator as each unit of 5 has to have a superior, and 1 unit can use stratagems better than 2. The Rhino, full or empty, can be used to complete secondary missions and sit on objectives. The Mortifiers will also sit on objectives. My preference is to be out of line of sight so we can't be shot to death and the enemy has to charge us to take the objective, where the always-on 2+ fight on death ability will come into effect. As the Battle Sisters move up to take their place, the Mortifiers can come out to play and fight in the turns we want to do a lot of charging, again at their ideal target of heavy infantry or light vehicles. If you can get both Mortifiers charging the same enemy vehicle, that can be a lot of damage. Don't forget that other units like the Repentia and Battle Sisters have grenades, and the Repentia would be a good choice to try and take out something big, like a Lehman Ross, but anything that's going to be toughness 12 or higher, they're wounding it on 6s. Even with rerolls to wound, the Repentia are not going to do so well. Better to tie it up with 1 Mortifier, and then the enemy is at -1 ballistic skill. And that's if they don't move. If they fall back, then they can't shoot, and Imperial Guard lack fall back and shoot with their tanks. The Seraphim attack the enemy home objective or land on any objectives that are unoccupied. Unlike in the Bringers of Flame detachment, where the Seraphim can zoom across the table with Inferno pistols and get into 3-inch melter range, or in the Army of Faith, where they are deployed on the table as a line of troops handing out auras, the Seraphim in the Penitent Host list work best when dropping in from reserves, and so they want the hand flamers that will be in range after they land. There is no triumph in this list to boost their movement. Not this 1000 point list that tries to get the most penitents for your pounds, and still have some power armored support sisters to help with primary and secondary missions. The 2000 point list I have is a much better combination of penitent units and regular sisters, whereas a Champions of the Faith detachment may have Paragon Warsuits or more Paragon Warsuits and Sacrosancts. They have been swapped out for penitent units, and you can see how similar it could be. But we are not a shooting detachment, we're a combat detachment. We want core sisters units like Seraphim dropping into complete secondary missions and claim the enemy home objective. Battle sisters generate miracle dice from their simulacrum. No castigators because we're not doing very much shooting, and the shooting we are doing already has rather high armor penetration. I want that Psalm of Righteous Judgment enhancement in the army. Exorcists can make use of the miracle dice of a 6 on damage, as can Morven Val's Paragon Warsuit multi-melters. We want Warsuits with multi-melters and more mauls than blades to smash higher toughness enemies. But every one of those units you have is a unit that isn't getting the benefit of the detachment rule or 5 out of 6 of the stratagems. Why take so many non-penitent units? To play the game in a way that isn't kill, maim, pray? This is the army list. Morven Val is the warlord with 3 Paragon Warsuits. An exorcist. A Hospitaller with Psalm of Righteous Judgment. She leads 10 Battle Sisters. We have the Triumph of St. Catherine, 5 Retributors with multi-melters, and the Superior has a Condemner bolt gun because that's the longest range weapon. A squad of 10 Arco-flagellants, a squad of 3 Arco-flagellants, 1 Penitent Engine, 3 separate units of Mortifiers, each one containing 1 Mortifier, so we can have that Anchorite sarcophagus on every one. A Canoness with a jump pack who has the Catechism of Divine Penitence. She leads 10 Repentia. And there's 2 squads of 5 Seraphim, and those units have max hand flamers. That comes to 2000 points exactly. That is 7 penitent units and 7 non-penitent units once characters are attached to units. It is a truly half and half list. Val and the Paragon Warsuits and the Exorcist are there to kill tanks and monsters of all sizes. The Exorcist works best against the things that were considered big and scary in older editions but are now overshadowed. Units like the Hellbrute, Carnifexes, Wraithlords. The Exorcist is also good at fighting very heavy infantry with high toughness and a good save, but ideally not an invulnerable save. Units like Chaos Chosen. Easy to wound, but they have a lot of wounds, so they're difficult for regular infantry to kill. Lots of the units in this army list are designed to die. Penitence through death, not by litter picking and other community services. The penitent flails are for hitting things, not being used to scrape away graffiti. So as units die, I want the Retributors there to take advantage of that. If you've been playing Hallowed Martyrs, you will know how good +1 to hit and +1 to wound can be. That is the benefit the Retributors get when they attack an enemy unit that killed one of your Adepta Sororitas units. Every unit in this army is Adepta Sororitas. The only ones that wouldn't be is if you take allies from the Imperial Agents or the Imperial Knights. A unit the enemy values will eventually kill one of the Penitent units, and that is when you strike with the multi-melters. The Triumph is there to speed boost the whole army, not just Penitent units. When you need to move the Retributors out to see their target, the Triumph can help. Val and the Warsuits want to get into Melter range to get +2 damage on all their Melter weapons, and have an easier charge, and the 2 Mauls want to be AP -2, the Triumph is there to do all that. It makes the movement 10, the Miracle Dice modified by the Triumph will get you into combat, as your charge roll is no longer 2d6, but d6 +1 +6. If anything, the Triumph lets the rest of the army keep up with the Penitent units. So it almost becomes 2 flanks, the Penitent side and the normal side that isn't tweaking from stimulants. The 3 Arco-flagellants will stay on the home objective to be some barrier to enemy deep strike coming to take it, and they can complete secondary missions like recover assets in your deployment zone. The Battle Sisters start on the home objective to try and generate a Miracle Dice turn 1, and with Defenders of the Faith, it is our objective even if the 3 Flagellants die, without needing to spend any command points on Final Redemption. The Sisters have a Hospitaller to keep them alive. The Sisters may end up trying to hold an objective against enemies not currently getting killed by Penitent units, so the Hospitaller's 5+ Feel No Pain and Resurrection keep them going. When not on an objective, or even when they are on an objective, they complete secondary missions. The Hospitaller has the Psalm of Righteous Judgment. You could have a Ministorum Priest with that enhancement joining Arco-flagellants instead, but once the priest dies, which is more likely to happen when they're on the front line, so do your chances of getting a miracle dice of a 6 from killing units. And a big strength of the Penitent Host is how many of your miracle dice are a 6. Psalm of Righteous Judgment isn't like once per turn or once per battle round. It is every time an enemy unit is destroyed by a penitent unit. So you can use a relatively low miracle dice on the Battle Sister squad because they have a cherub, so as soon as you've done an act of faith, you will get a new miracle dice. That's a miracle dice that can be later turned into a 6. The Canoness with the jump pack joins the Repentia. I like the extra movement afforded by the jump pack to get closer for charges. I will take the Holy Eviscerator. It isn't just theme, it has sustained hits, so when I use the Passion of the Penitent for 0 command points, it gets a bonus, and we have Divine Deliverance once per game for 3 more attacks with devastating wounds. The more attacks you have, or potentially the more attacks you have, the more devastating wounds you can cause. I know that means no Palatine with Repentia, but I think that without access to other enhancements that boost the Palatine's attacks, remember that Palatines don't get sustained hits, that is only on the Repentia weapons. So the Palatine underperforms in the Penitent Host compared to other detachments. I have of course played Palatine Repentia over and over, and it overkills an enemy unit and then dies quickly unless you can orchestrate the perfect target for it, if such a target is in the enemy army, get the unit there, destroy the enemy, and then maybe survive a bit longer. If the Canoness with Repentia get hit, we have a free Surge move, or a free 4+ Feel No Pain, or worst case, the Repentia and the Canoness all die, but it's free sticky objectives as long as we were destroyed when standing on a circle. With a jump pack you can't go in a Rhino, but it still feels like a toss-up between the jump Canoness or Palatine, and this time wasn't Palatine. The Penitent Punch comes from 10 Arco-flagellants, a fast-moving Penitent Engine, and 3 Mortifiers, with the Penitent Engine able to take out screening and infiltrating enemy units while the Mortifiers wait their turn. Better to keep them hidden than expose them just for a few heavy bolter shots. Unless those heavy bolter shots are finishing off an enemy unit, then the Psalm of Righteous Judgment comes in and we get a miracle dice of a 6. Finally, the Seraphim with Hand Flamers complete secondary missions, remove the enemy units from the enemy home objective, and be a nuisance the enemy has to deal with while there are flaily boys slapping their troops about. So here is an example of a battle I played where the Penitent Host worked perfectly for me, every unit did well, did their job correctly, and it led to absolute victory. I was playing against World Eaters, really nice player, we had a lot of fun, and we took our time with the early turns because we both knew, with killing focused combat armies, turn 4 and 5 would not greatly matter. They would be very short and basically add numbers to the point score. I went first. I didn't pick a vow for the first turn because we need the enemy to be closer. If going second at the start of the first battle round, consider how close the enemy is likely to come, then you may want to consider Death Before Disgrace if they can charge you first turn, but I would generally stick with no vow battle round 1. Remember, we are a counter-attack detachment, at least how I play it, so we need the enemy to get close before we charge a lot of their units at once. On turn 1, the Penitent Engine ran in, advancing and charging with a Lash of Guilt, so it was moving 8 inches plus 6 inches plus 2d6 charge. It was very unlikely to fail the charge. An 18-inch deployment zone difference is very common, and we are going 16 inches if starting near the Triumph. The Penitent Engine is going in to kill something. Something in the middle of the board. A screen, an infiltrating unit, a scouting unit, goremongers. The miracle dice generated by the Battle Sister Simulacrum in that first turn becomes a 6, rather than a 4-5 or a 6. The Penitent Engine will die for another miracle dice, and give the Melter Retributors something they have +1 to hit and wound against. You have the potential to have that Penitent Engine surge into combat if they get shot a bit. In the game, they were charged by Khorne Berserkers and a Hellbrute, so there was no option to do that. But you can continue to be annoying with this one Penitent Engine. Overwatch is another optional stratagem. The enemy wants to move forward, and we are in the way. And because I had the first turn, I was able to move closer to the objectives with disposable mortifiers already on them. Mortifiers that fight on death, which is very upsetting to the Cornate forces. But still, they come closer. Turn 2 is then the go turn. Fast moving, +3 movement on everything, as the Vow, mass charge from behind cover, with a stratagem 1 unit can advance and charge. Use those miracle dice that we've been saving up on the charge. The 6 from killing something with the Penitent Engine turn 1, and the 6 provided by the Triumph at the start of Battle Round 1 and Battle Round 2. When the Canoness and the Repentia charged, they have Passion of the Penitent, getting critical hits on a 5+, and that doesn't cost a command point. The Seraphim drop in turn 2 onto the enemy home objective to start burning away their cultists, and the Retributors came out and shot the Hellbrute. It passed all but one of its saves with a reroll, but the Exorcist finished it off. Combat phase is then a lot of murder. Battle Round 3, I chose Fight on Death. The Penitent Host is an army that can like going second, so after the battle round, which is our turn second, where we get the +3 movement turn to get into combat, we go straight into Fight on Death for the enemy's turn 3. In the game I went first, and I wiped out the Chaos Army. They didn't get a turn 3. I lost 2 units. The Penitent Engine sent in first, and 3 Arco-flagellants sitting on the home objective. It didn't matter that the 3 Arco-flagellants died. The objective was already stickied from the Battle Sisters Defenders of the Faith. 100 victory points to 20 victory points. My turn 2 and 3 were low scoring on the primary, but by killing the enemy I was able to make up for it later, and victory was guaranteed if not the highest possible score. Once you understand keywords and know how to hide your Penitent units, have them die at the right time, and use that Penitent core of the army with support from Sisters in Power Armor, you can do very well with the Penitent Host. But it's difficult because we're even more fragile than a normal Sororitas army, but this is certainly great fun. After a 1000 point list and a 2000 point list, there is a 1500 point list that is along the lines of fun and interesting. That is in a battle report that shows off my Penitent Host army in an Ecclesiarchy themed list. I still took a squad of Battle Sisters, but why did I want to include a Dog Martyr? My darlings and viewers, have a great flaily day of 40k.